Okay, welcome back everyone. Welcome back to the Hoplite channel. Again, I'm your host, Hop. I appreciate your return. If this is a return visit, if it's your first time, welcome. Although we are right now going into, as you clicked on the video, Samurai Literature, Yamamoto Tsunetomo Part 2. If it is your first visit, I recommend going back and watching Yamamoto Tsunetomo Part 1. But for everyone who's here after watching the first part, thanks for coming back. So I said in the last segment dedicated to Tsunetomo that we'd talk a little bit more about him personally, and then, of course, continue with some readings from Hagakure, which is his most famous work. So what do we know about Yamamoto Tsunetomo? Well, as I said in the first part, he was born in 1659. And he was born to a man named Yamamoto Tsunetomo. And his father, Yamamoto Tsunetomo, was 71 in this year when Tsunetomo was born. So he probably didn't anticipate the birth of his last son. And the record indicates that this is probably true. He did not anticipate having another child at this stage in his life, but it happened. And according to what we know, his father actually was looking to abandon him. He was the youngest son, and this wasn't really what he considered a necessary addition to the family. But as luck would have it, Yamamoto Tsunetomo, who was a samurai at this time in the court of Mitsushige, his group leader in the samurai that were employed by this daimyo, he actually persuaded Yamamoto Tsunetomo to allow him to adopt Tsunetomo and not abandon him or trade him away to someone selling him into child slavery. So fortunately for Tsunetomo, he had a father who had a good group leader. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have gotten Hagakure, and Tsunetomo, who knows what would have happened to him. But at this time, in 1659, Mitsushige, Yamamoto Tsunetomo's daimyo, was lord in Saga for about 2 years. And as we later found out, Tsunetomo was very loyal to his lord. He, as a samurai, was quite devout and absolutely believed that one of the primary directives of any samurai was unfailing loyalty to his daimyo and shogun and emperor. And we see this towards the end of Tsunetomo's career as a samurai, because when Mitsushige died in 1700, Tsunetomo wanted to perform junshi. And junshi was the word for ritual suicide, seppuku, for the purposes of following your lord, in his case Mitsushige, into death. Now this seems a little foolish. There's records of pharaohs in ancient Egypt being mummified after their death, and then servants actually being killed or mummified alive with those dead pharaohs so that they would have servants in the afterlife. Seems kind of stupid and a waste of life, and it is, but in the samurai mindset, their purpose, as Tsunetomo felt, was to serve their lord in this life or the next. So he wanted to perform this junshi. And perhaps it's because of the abandonment of his father and the adoption by the group leader and later his service to Mitsushige that he felt this was owed, that his life belonged to his lord because his father had abandoned him and he would have been cast out from the samurai caste and perhaps put into child slavery or God knows what. So he felt this loyalty to the group leader who later brought him into the ploy of Mitsushige. It's also reported that as a child he was quite sickly and didn't really have an easy go being a kid, especially without a father and knowing that he could have been abandoned. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Tsunetomo long after his death, but this is possible. But in any event, junshi was forbidden by Mitsushige, and the clan would not permit it. And so Mitsushige's successor was, let's say, not in the same caliber of men that Tsunetomo thought he would be. So there were many disagreements, I guess, with Tsunetomo and Mitsushige's successor lord. So he decided to leave the samurai life and was given permission to seek, his fortune elsewhere. And at this point, he became a monk, and we see he actually became a Buddhist monk of all things. And he took upon the name Yamamoto Jocho. And during this time, as a monk, as Yamamoto Jocho, he composed Hagakure, which we're about to read from here in a second. And this was composed between the years of 1709 and 1716. And as we see, he died shortly thereafter. And he translated, or rather, he had a scribe transcribe the teachings of his Hagakure for publication. So that is the background of Tsunetomo. Hard life. Yeah, you could say he didn't really have the benefit of growing up in a samurai family in the traditional sense. And there's no account that he ever saw battle either, that he was able to put his Bushido to the test on the field of battle the way that Yagi Munenori was able to, or Miyamoto Musashi. But he was quite a learned man, that's for sure. And maybe it was because of this hard upbringing that he was considered an outcast by his father, only to be rescued by his father's group leader, and that he missed his chance, or there was no opportunity for him to actually sacrifice himself or perhaps win victory on the field of battle as a samurai, that he felt Hagakure was what he was going to do to leave his mark on the world as someone who walked the path of Bushido as a samurai, but had to conclude his life as a Buddhist monk due to disagreements with his lord's successor. So anyway, let's read some more from Hagakure and talk some about the lessons therein. I will, of course, provide the read along so you can keep up. Okay, we jump to page 26. And Tsunetomo said, "The child of parents who have a bad relationship will be unfilial. This is natural. Even the birds and beasts are affected by what they are used to seeing and hearing from the time they are born. Also, the relationship between father and child may deteriorate because of a mother's foolishness. A mother loves her child above all things and will be partial to the child that is corrected by his father. If she becomes the child's ally, there will be discord between father and son. Because of the shallowness of her mind, a woman sees the child as her support in old age." Okay, so that's an interesting passage there. Given the history of Tsunetomo and his father being 71, perhaps it was because of this absence of a father figure that he had to grow up quite early, and he saw how other samurai dealt with their children, and how perhaps he believed the mother's influence would make the samurai soft if she sought to make this child her ally against her father or his father, and that her support in old age would be this ally that she formed during the boy's adolescence. You could say that there's some truth to this. However, we kind of get a little bit more of a window into Tsunetomo's thoughts personally, and perhaps how he came to realize that the lack of a traditional upbringing in feudal Japan for him perhaps gave him better clarity of mind later in life as a samurai who dedicated his life to Bushido and only this frame of reference for which to see the world. All right. We go now to page 29. And Tsunetomo wrote, "Whenever anyone is in unhappy circumstances, you should above all inquire after them by visiting or sending some gift.
and you should never in your whole life be negligent towards someone for whom you have received a favor. In this world, the people who rely on others when they are in difficulties and afterwards not give them a thought are many. Okay. So, he's talking about the virtue of benevolence as far as Bushido goes. If you have friends and if you count yourself among a person's allies, do not ever fail to return a favor. And if they are in difficult times, always be there to lend a helping hand, because time will come when you are also in dire straits and perhaps need a helping hand from your fellow samurai. This virtue of benevolence fosters camaraderie. It fosters this fraternal bond among samurai, that even if you are off the battlefield, you can still rely on your battle buddies to come and get you and make sure you're okay, even when you think no one is there looking out for you. This virtue of benevolence will foster a good relationship among samurai, among their uji or clan, and it will make the giving and receiving of other virtues that much more easy. Okay, we now turn to page 31. And Tsunetomo said, calculating people are contemptible. The reason for this is the calculation deals with loss and gain, and the loss and gain mind never stops. Death is considered loss and life is considered gain. Thus, death is something that such a person does not care for, and he is contemptible. Scholars and their like are men who with wit and speech hide their own true cowardice and greed. Lord Nasoshige said, the way of the samurai is in desperateness. 10 men or more cannot kill such a man. Common sense will not accomplish great things. Simply become insane and desperate.
Okay. So again, we dive right back into the Shinto arm of Bushido, the militaristic, no-nonsense drill sergeant. You are not to be a calculating man when it comes to the life of a Bushi, the practicer of Bushido, a samurai. Calculating people are contemptible, and that they always measure things in terms of gain and loss. If I do this, what will it gain me? If I sacrifice that, what do I lose? Or if I sacrifice this and lose that, do I gain something greater? He says these people are contemptible, especially in terms of Bushido, because they simply look at life as a gain and death as a loss. So they will avoid everything they can when it comes to the quote-unquote loss of death, and will exert all of their efforts into the quote-unquote gain that is life. And he is saying that the samurai cannot look at life like this. Life can be gained, but life can also be lost if you're living as a coward. Death can be gained if you die a hero, or you die performing your art as a samurai following Bushido. Death could be a loss if you die dishonorably. But don't ever look at something as simply a matter of gain and loss in and of itself, being one in that category alone, and two, something that you should always put on a measuring scale against the other. He says these people are contemptible because you can never rely upon such people to seek anything that is outside their own thoughts, their own desires, their own benefit. The samurai must be selfless in this regard and not regard life as gain and death as loss, because there is no such thing as gain or loss in the warrior's way. There is simply the way. There are the virtues, and there are things that are not virtues. So contemptible people being those who measure life and loss and gain, according to Tsunetomo, these are those who you should avoid.
Okay, we jump now, as I said, moving along fast, to page 32, and this is the last reading. And Tsunetomo wrote, "It is spiritless to think that you cannot attain to that which you have seen and heard the masters attain. The masters are men. you are also a man. If you think that you will be inferior in doing something, you will be on that road very soon. Master Itai said Confucius was a sage because he had the will to become a scholar when he was 15 years old. He was not a sage because he studied later on. This is the same as the Buddhist maxim, first intention, then enlightenment. So, in this passage, you could say this is about as cheery and optimistic as Yamamoto Tsunetomo can get, as encouraging as he could be to a young samurai. And he tells them simply, the masters you see were once like you. They didn't know their left hand from their right foot. They didn't know the sky from the earth. But they had to learn, and they had to have first a will and a desire to learn. As he says, the Buddhist maxim, first intention, then enlightenment. You must have first this intention to do something grand, noble, something that is beyond and greater than yourself. But the masters you see were also like you. They did not have this mastery the day after they decided to make this intention to be a master of the samurai art and the Bushido way. They had to learn, they had to practice, they had to hone their technique, and they had to never give up. So he says, as the individual he quotes said, Confucius chose to be a sage, and he did so at the age of 15 by first choosing to be a scholar. If you choose to be a master in your later life, you must first today choose to be a samurai. And that samurai, if he decides, can continue to practice his art, to hone his skills, to become a better bushi, a better samurai for his lord, and that is the way to mastery. But simply because you see someone as that much better than you, do not assume that you will never attain that. Because if you make this assumption, you will prove yourself right, and you will never attain this. Okay, yeah, that's a good one to end on. That's a positive note. All right, this concludes Yamamoto Tsunetomo Part 2, and we'll pick up with the third and final part of him and his Hagakure. If you're liking this, again, appreciate you watching. Give it a thumbs up or subscribe if you like the channel. If you think some folks would be interested in this topic, samurai literature and Bushido, share it around, and we will see you for Part 3. Hopefully the next couple days here I'll get it out. But either way, once again, thanks for being here, and take it easy.